Just a few words about how this is going to go today once you get into your small groups. As soon as I'm through talking, which will be fairly short, um, we'll invite you into a breakout room, and you will have a facilitator. Um, we will need there to be a note taker in every room. So please consider whether you're able to do that for the group that you're in. The topic is, how can we build our movement? And by that, we mean, how can we increase participation? How can we increase funding? How can we increase media coverage, outreach, that kind of thing? So we're not talking about ways to influence Congress or anything like that, unless it is going to help us build the movement. We'll begin by doing some introductions, and when we're doing the introductions, we'd like you to mention four things. We'd like you to mention your name, where you live, what organization or organizations you work with, and if you have a position in that organization, tell us what that is. And then we'd like you to put your name and your organization into the chat. As soon as we've done that, we would like you, if you read through the thing that I sent yesterday that asked you to write down a best practice that you think that your group really profited from, then if you wrote something down like that, that will be a time to share it very briefly. We just want to know what those ideas are, and that will hopefully kick off the brainstorming session. We'll brainstorm new ideas and improvements on old ideas for about 15 minutes. And then we will take those ideas, ask ourselves in the small group which ones are the most interesting to us, and then we'll subject them to a variety of criteria that I sent you yesterday. And those are, can the tactic be accomplished by the group that's trying to do it? Does this tactic have a clear target? That is, a person who can give you what you want, and who is it? Does this tactic give people a sense of their own power? Will this tactic help us raise funds? And if so, how? And will this tactic build leadership in the organization that you represent? So those are the kinds of questions. You don't have to limit it to those questions, but those are the kinds of questions. So when we think of a great idea, sometimes we think, sometimes in a brainstorming session, we'll say, oh, that sounds terrific. But then when we analyze it with respect to criteria such as these, we think, well, maybe that's not as good as we thought. And maybe we need to go back to the drawing board. So that's why we're doing that practice. When we're doing this, all of this, please help the note taker make sure that the ideas are all being captured, and that the comments about these ideas are all being captured. About 15 minutes from the end of our time, we will call you back into the main plenary, this group, and we will ask you, if you came up with something that you really got excited about in your small group, please share it very briefly. We will subsequently, as Ward was saying, we're going to share every idea that comes out of this that gets captured by the note takers. So you'll all get that in the email afterwards. And you will all find in your email, if you haven't already seen it, an invitation to a listserv where all this kind of thing can be discussed more extensively after the conference. We'll hear a few real supportive kinds of words at the end, and then we'll be done. So you will be able to ask questions of your facilitator when you get into the room. I hope the facilitators will identify themselves as soon as the people get in. So I think with that, I've said what I need to say. And with that, I think I'll open all the rooms. So let's begin by doing the introductions. So if you will tell us your name and where you live and what organizations you work with and what your position is, and then enter your name and your organization into the chat. That's what we're looking for right now. So my name is Peter Bergel. I live in Salem, Oregon. I work with a group called Nuclear Abolition Now, and I'm a former director of Oregon Peaceworks, which was a statewide organization here in Oregon, and I still work with them. My position is to be a member at this point, and I provide some leadership. And I'll pass it on to Rick. Go ahead, Rick.
My name is Rick Stagenborg. I'm from Albany, Oregon, and I'm the president of the Veterans for Peace Alliance chapter.
Okay, great. David, how about you? David Courtwright?
Yeah, David Courtwright. I'm living now in Ithaca, New York, as a visiting scholar at Cornell. And I don't have any organization anymore. I used to be director of SANE, but not actively in any group right now, other than New York Peace Actions.
Okay, thank you. Jim Thomas?
Yes, hello, everybody. I live in Seattle, and I work primarily with the Pax Christi USA Disarmament Working Group, but I'm also a volunteer with the initiative of the 4 bishops of Seattle, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki, a partnership for a world without nuclear weapons.
Great. And how about you, Leonard?
There it is. Hi, Leonard Iger here. My principal organization, Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action, not far from Jim Thomas. So at any rate, for years I've been doing a lot of things, particularly coordinating communications, and now I kind of informally do all those same things, and research and writing and acting up.
Okay, thank you. Shelley? You're muted.
Good morning. My name is Shelley Cordoville. I'm with the Veterans for Peace chapter. That's mostly what I'm doing right now because I worked with homeless vets for about 3 years.
And where are you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in Eugene, Oregon.
Okay, thank you. James Wagner?
Yes, I'm James. Usually go by Jim Wagner. I live in Frederick, Maryland. I'm a member of several groups. A couple of them are Prevent Nuclear War Maryland, and a new nonprofit I'm starting called Plant the Light, which is an interdisciplinary group with conflict resolution and peace, one of our disciplines. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joe Scary. I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and I am active right now with Back from the Brink, work a lot with the hubs around the country. I also was involved in passing a resolution nationally within the United Church of Christ, supporting Back from the Brink, so I'm very interested in that dimension. Thanks.
Ira?
I'm Ira Helfand. I live in Northampton, Massachusetts, principally working through the Back from the Brink campaign at this time, but also working with IBPNW and International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons.
Terrific. And Kevin?
Kevin Martin. I'm the president of Peace Action and Peace Action Education Fund. I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland, just outside of DC. And also recently I've been convening a national grassroots group called Ceasefire Now Grassroots. So it's about Gaza, and that's been basically taking all of my time since last fall, since last October.
Can't imagine why. Okay, well, thank you very much.
We didn't hear from Ellen, except
Ellen, that's right.
Yes, my video I'm not putting up, but hello everybody, it's great to see you. I am with Women's International League for Peace and Freedom U.S. section. I live in the mountains of North Carolina, and I'm co-founder of the Proposition 1 campaign for a nuclear-free future.
I'm going to jump in. I'm Joseph Gerson. I was in another group with Diane. There was just two of us. I'm in the Boston, Cambridge area. I'm the president of the Campaign for Peace, Disarmament, and Common Security. I'm on the board of Massachusetts Peace Action. I was the vice president of the International Peace Bureau and still work closely with them and work with a range of peace, disarmament, and justice organizations across the Asia Pacific region as well as in Europe.
Great, thank you. You're an august bunch.
Diane has introduced herself.
Yeah, sorry. I'm Diane Chavez. I'm in Salem, Oregon, and I work with 350 and NAN and Friends Committee on National Legislation and various other groups.
Terrific. So did anybody write down a best practice from their group, something that really helped you build your group?
I just want to say, I thought through that, and it was a really interesting question. And I'm very briefly coming from this small grassroots kind of ragtag organization, which is like I always talk about herding feral cats. It's been an interesting run. So we have really had a hard time finding anything that has really brought the group together as much as just doing our annual actions 3 times a year. And very briefly, we've done everything from billboards, bus advertisements, bannering over interstate freeways, publishing PSAs in newspapers, appeals to Navy personnel, etc. And right now we're actually working on a comic book in conjunction with a large comic book publishing company about nuclear weapons, and I won't get into, and there are lots of other things, but it's really been hard to get the organization, being a small grassroots organization, to really come together on large projects, including a nuclear free zone project and a No to New Trident campaign. So it's been really, really difficult. And yeah, we keep trying new things, the comic book being the most recent one, where we hope to engage young readers, young people, and educate them, get them to ask questions and do things. But again, these are tactics.
Yeah.
What happened?
Looks like he was transferred elsewhere.
He got
Beam me
beat
up.
up.
Beam me up.
Down the memory hole.
Well, I've got people they're saying that they're unassigned, but they're not, they aren't. Anyway, any other people have ideas that they jotted down that really helped build the movement?
Well, I'll just jump in and say that, counterintuitively, my organization grew quite large, it had good growth during the COVID period. And we did that through a series of conferences and webinars, which had US and to a degree international reach. And we tried to keep the webinars sort of on the cutting and controversial edge, trying to go into areas that people maybe sensed were there, but they hadn't dug into, and so we've built out our lists and been able to get some collaborative movements in response to action alerts and so on.
So you found the webinars to be really helpful in building the movement.
Yeah, it gets a little bit old now, as there's so many of them, but targeting and being strategic, I think, can be helpful.
Yeah, I think Mass Peace Action has been really
Mm.
excellent at that. Kevin, what have you found with Peace Action? You're muted.
You're muted.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, which I don't know is particularly helpful for this meeting today. And of course, our organization has worked for nuclear disarmament since 1957. But I think of ourselves as the fire department. We're the peace fire department. So the last few years, I mean, we have ongoing work on nuclear disarmament on the Pentagon budget, but around crises or flashpoints like Korea and Yemen and Palestine, we've been able to, even though we have campaign plans and priorities for the year, we've been able to shift quickly when we've needed to. But I'm tired of being the fire department, and I imagine a lot of people are. So that's good in terms of flexibility, and of course it's mostly our grassroots network, and we don't have a lot of discord around that. Like, yeah, we have to stop this god awful genocide in Gaza, and we have to put aside most of our other work. That's what we got to do because we're the fire department. But that makes it challenging to think about broader, longer term campaigns like for nuclear disarmament.
Yeah. Well, if people don't have other things that they think were really successful.
I had my hand up, Peter.
Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, somewhat actually an opposite approach from the one that Kevin just set forth. We found it's been particularly useful and helpful in building a movement to have a clear focus on a long-term goal, getting rid of nuclear weapons, and providing vehicles whereby people locally can take local action towards that universal goal. So getting resolutions passed in various cities and towns has provided a vehicle for activity and for bringing people in. Getting various church groups to endorse the campaign has provided a vehicle for reaching out to people, getting them active, and bringing them into the campaign. And as you know, the Back from the Brink campaign is now developed into quite a significant national presence using that strategy, and I think it's worked well. And we've done this, tried very much to do this as an unbranded activity, whereby all the different groups that are part of the campaign have an equal place in sort of creating their own local activities and figuring out how to do it locally, but bringing them all together now in this network of hubs around the country to try to give some net coherence to the effort, so people feel that they're doing something locally, but they're part of a national campaign that actually can achieve the goal that we're trying to achieve.
And Ira, when you are doing that, what are you asking those groups to do?
We're asking them to endorse. We're using the freeze model. Basically, we're asking them to endorse a specific policy platform, in the belief that if we get enough people to endorse this platform, we're creating a national consensus around this platform. And so we're, asking cities and towns to say that they support this. We're asking church groups to say they support this. We're asking labor unions to say they support this. And we're building up a network now of 480 NGO organizations around the country that have agreed to support and endorse this platform. And to the extent that we're working with public officials like Congress, the goal isn't so much to talk to congressmen and their staffs in Washington. It's to organize in their districts, to get people in the district organized around this, to use the approach to the member of Congress as a way of organizing local activity.
Thank you. Diane?
I was just going to say that I think what we need is not only develop leadership, but we need to have ways for people to follow without a lot of input, without having to invest a tremendous amount of time. Not everybody's ready to do this 24/7. Like, for instance, when we did the film festival a couple of weeks ago, we had a lot of people that donated to a silent auction. None of those people showed up, but all those people showed support in a way that they could do within the context of their life. So I think we need to think about not everybody being a leader and doing this, to the level that we're doing it, but what can you do in a short term, like, and I'm thinking, for instance, Indivisible just started a campaign that I'm not real familiar with, but they're saying, you know, instead of asking you to go out and canvass for the election for, you know, big old turf and, you know, cell hours and interdata and all this, they just gonna send you 10 people in your block and you go to those 10 people. It's, you know, it's 10 people that are close to you, and it's simple and it's confined and concise, and that's all you have to do. You don't have to, you know, take it to the next level. So we need to think about that. And I do think I wanted to second what I just heard about a clear goal. I think sometimes we get lost in all the little details of this bill or this weapon system or that weapon system. And what we really want is the TPNW. We want to eliminate nuclear weapons, and we want to build security outside and diplomacy outside of nuclear weapons or outside of any weapons. And so I think keep it simple and make sure, accept people that aren't leaders but are followers.
Okay, thanks. There was another hand up, but it's down now. Was that you, Kevin?
Yeah, and it was a question, but it was more of a challenge or a problem, so maybe we don't want to go there. It was a question for both Ira and Ellen, actually, but I can wait.
Okay. Well, I think it's time now for us to, you know, get into the brainstorming part. So new ideas that folks have about ways to engage more people. We're having some issues in our area in terms of doing that. The program that Diane just suggested or just mentioned was very effective in terms of welding our group into a good team, a very effective team. But we didn't add a lot of new people through that activity, and so we're kind of thinking about new ways to get people activated. We've done a lot of the things that Ira had mentioned, but we haven't had much success in getting into the young people. We're all older. So what ideas do you have?
Well, one thing I could share is because Back from the Brink has had some major success recently in reaching out to young people. There's a new organization, Students for Nuclear Disarmament, that has formed around Back from the Brink. That has it's high school students, actually, not even college students for the most part, although there are some college students involved as well. And they have organized chapters now, and I think it's 7 states. I'm not sure the exact details. They have several more in formation. They just started this about a couple of months ago, and are expanding rather rapidly, using basically the kinds of tools that we've always used. They're within Back from the Brink. They're talking to other students about the danger of nuclear war, about the fact that this is real and it's going to be horrible, and the fact that we can do something about it, and then urging students to get involved, either getting their cities and towns to pass resolutions if they haven't yet, getting their student governments to consider passing resolutions, getting other clubs within their school or university to pass resolutions supporting the campaign, and bringing in other students to reach out to do that. So that's been a really exciting thing that we've seen just recently that I think would be really good for people to be aware of and to sort of try to foster in their particular localities if they don't have student group going yet.
Joseph?
So first of all, just to kind of appreciate what Ira said, and he and I have had a kind of dialogue here for a while. And so while I absolutely affirm the near explosive focus on nuclear disarmament as such, I'm also, my belief is that that has to take place in a larger context. And that context right now has to do with, if you will, 2 new or revived Cold Wars, arms races, the role of the Russians in Ukraine, certainly what's going on in Gaza. And so my approach has been, while on the one hand, you know, walking and chewing gum at the same time, trying to affirm and move along the line that Ira has laid out, at the same time needing to engage the discussion activities around the broader threats that are, if you will, fueling the arms race. So a little bit of both.
Yeah. One of the things that Ira and I talked about a long time ago when he was here was getting more celebrities involved. And I was very excited about what the Nuclear Threat Initiative did around the Oppenheimer film. I think if we can find ways to get those folks involved, that was very, very helpful in the 1980s. And I think we really need to focus a lot on the celebrities aspect of it, because that, there's a reason why they're called influencers. Anyone else?
Yeah, we need something. I mean, Back from the Brink is, I think, very useful. And as Ira said, builds on the freeze concept, but somehow getting something even simpler that people understand affects their life at the moment, is something that can bring a different kind of energy into. We're lacking energy, and I think that's coming up with a formula, as Randy Forsberg did, is something we desperately need.
Would you like to unpack that a little bit more, Joseph?
Well, back we were, I mean, the level of consciousness about the nuclear threat, while it's certainly better than it was a year ago, is still comparatively low. In 1979, it was building pretty intensely, and it was out of that context that a small discussion group at MIT was figuring out what can they do to stop the spiraling arms race. And out of those discussions came Randy Forsberg's concept and short paper calling for a halt to the arms race, which got broken, got simplified, into the concept of a freeze, which, in the context of the fears that were growing at the moment, the deployment of SS-20s, but also the Pershing IIs and the Tomahawks to Europe. I mean, people understood an immediate existential fear. I don't think people feel that at the moment, although Russia's done its best to kind of help build that moment. And in that context, certainly here on the East Coast, we had a couple of brilliant people. Randy Keeler in Western Massachusetts, David, I remember David's last name in Vermont, who took that idea to town meetings, and it won. In 1981, 17 towns voted for the freeze in Vermont. It led to an op-ed in the Times, and people had a model that they could then build on at a community level. So I understand that Back from the Brink is trying to build off that model, but I think we have to find a way to somehow sharpen it, intensify it. And with Gaza going on, it makes it a little bit harder, And I'll just say one more thing, kind of jumping into another part of it here. I mean, when we got into the early 80s, in Russia, you had a head of state, Gorbachev, who understood the importance of moving toward nuclear disarmament, maybe even abolishing nuclear weapons. At the moment, related to Ukraine, we're in a situation where the Russians say, we won't talk to you about even arms control until we're satisfied with the outcome of Ukraine. And we have a situation in China where they're saying, as long as you're threatening us, we're going to build up our nuclear arsenal. And Lord knows we've got a number of flashpoints. So, I think part of it is trying to get down to some kind of, emotional essence that people can respond to. And having partners helps.
Go ahead, Ira.
I mean, I certainly agree that we're not at the point that we were in 1981, but I think we probably are sort of at the point that we were in 1979, and maybe even in 1980. There's been I'm enormously encouraged by the significant uptick in attention to this issue that we've seen in the last couple of months that was alluded to earlier. The Times series At the Brink, the Ernest Moniz's op-ed in the LA Times, the statement by the 20 A-list Hollywood people, all the attention that Annie Jacobson's new book is getting, including George Will's column in the Post earlier this week, saying people got to pay attention to this. This is on the ballot for this election. The Netflix series, Boston Globe, which has been horrible on this issue, having an editorial, I think it's now 3 weeks ago, asking, why aren't people talking about nuclear war? There's an answer to that with regards to the Globe. They've kind of suppressed the discussion all this time, but the fact that they're raising it now is the key point. I think this, it's not where we want it to be, but it's so much different than it was even 3 or 4 months ago. And I think we need to appreciate that and figure out how we build on that. I think that in terms of the thing to focus on, I think Back from the Brink, frankly, does do what the Freeze did. We just need to do the work that people did then to get this out more widely. And we need to get, there are several hundred or 480 organizations that are part of the Back from the Brink campaign. Many of them are members in name only. One of our key goals this year is to try to get those groups more active in the campaign, especially some of the really big groups like Sierra Club and NRDC that could put a lot of muscle into this effort if they were so inclined. So I think that, there's a plan here. And the question isn't to say, well, we need to come up with a plan. The question is, how do we execute this plan more energetically? And again, the way forward, I think, is not that obscure. It's just that we need to take this up a little bit more energetically, perhaps, than we have.
Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, so thanks. What I would contribute is I see that we have a real dilemma, which is everybody agrees that Congress is incompetent to get anything done. And yet we must have a model of change. How do we think this is going to get changed? Because if it's not Congress, who is it? And let's be able to say that. Otherwise, we're just engaging in magical thinking that there's a lot of activity and then somehow a miracle happens, like that cartoon in the New Yorker, a miracle happens and then they're gone. So I think we have to be real. We're going to have some difficult conversations about what is our model of change. And that has some relevance because the characteristic of these weapons is that they make people want to not think about them. And so if we do a lot of work to get people to think about them, we have got to immediately have cut an issue so that we can have a success. So it's an organizing principle. You cut an issue that you can win, you win, then the people you've engaged are hooked. And again, the thing so what I was very focused on since 2015, when my sister and I sat down with Ted Lieu in his office before the election, and he was ginning up this bill on presidential authority. And he said, I'll tell you another thing, if this guy Trump gets elected, this is going to be a real issue. And we looked at each other and we said, what is this guy thinking? How could it possibly be the case that Trump is going to get elected? That's how long ago that was. And I've watched this over these past years, and it looks to me like the issue that we should cut. It's narrow enough that people can see some kind of result. And what happened on January 6th just affirms that for me, and what's coming down the pike tends to also affirm that for me too. Thanks.
Kevin?
I should have said earlier that several of our Peace Action grassroots affiliates have had really good success at bringing in young people. New York State Peace Action especially, they have 15 student chapters around the state. And then plus, we have our long-standing Peace Action chapters, some of which go back to the Freeze or even to SANE, also in the state. So it's an interesting mix because you have these chapters that are mostly graybeards, and then you have these young folks. I don't think nuclear disarmament is particularly the issue that has, catalyzed these young people. I think it's a very broad, intersectional approach, which is what brings young people in. And it reminds me, I'm of two minds about all of this. I think having things like Back from the Brink, warheads to windmills, the upcoming actions around Daniel Ellsberg Week, which frankly I haven't paid attention to. I don't know what it's going to be, but I think it's great to have those types of ongoing issue campaigns. But I've never thought that you could somehow get rid of nuclear weapons and the whole superstructure of US and global militarism remains in place. It's just that we somehow got rid of nukes. And in terms of that broader organizing strategy, looking at the broader structure of US militarism and making connections to the climate change movement, I was very pleased to see an email from 350 yesterday that made links to the situation in Gaza, and broader US militarism. And also things like the Poor People's Campaign or other economic and social justice campaigns. And it all, goes back to the framework of MLK, of the giant triplets of militarism, racism, and economic materialism or economic exploitation. So none of that is to say that campaigns that are specifically focused on nuclear weapons to the exclusion of these broader problems in society are not useful. They are useful because they help raise awareness. But I think without making those connections intersectionally, particularly to economic justice, social justice, and climate change, I just don't see that there's a magic delete key for nuclear weapons. As horrible and unique a threat to life on Earth as they are, if you leave the rest of US and global militarism in place, you're not going to get rid of nuclear weapons.
Okay.
Let me jump in with one last thing here, which is I think it's important for us not to engage in either or thinking. That we're dealing with broad populations at different moments. The structure of contradictions and of political forces allows something to break through, often at a time when you don't expect it. And so I think we need to understand what we're doing in a collaborative way, in a mutually reinforcing way. And I do like what Joe Scarry was saying before about the need for us to be thinking in terms of kind of classical organizing principles and facing the if you will, the existential danger we face in the assaults on democracy here in our society.
Okay, let's see, Diane and then Ira.
So I'm actually thinking I really like the fact that we're broadening the base, that obviously any kind of war is an environmental threat, so that's pretty obvious. It's an economic threat. And yet we're still very much, it's a right-wing, left-wing issue. And I'm thinking I had a conversation with somebody from Braver Angels. And as much as I like hanging out in my little bubble, I think we need to address that too, because, and I said to this guy, well, nobody wants nuclear war, and he says, well, Putin does. And I'm like, well, does he, or what is it that he wants exactly? And so we need to start talking with groups like Braver Angels or somebody where we get on both sides of the political spectrum, because what we all want is security of some kind and safety. And I don't know how to exactly bridge that gap, but what's her name? Tulsi Gabbard, who was a Democrat, is very concerned about nuclear war. She just became a Republican. And, she's doing it not in the style that I would want to, but she's out there talking about, I don't want nuclear weapons, and so we've got to really stretch to figure out how to make this not a left-wing issue. Anyway.
Ira?
Yeah, I just want to second the point that Diane just made. I think we need to build a very broad movement but that includes people who are not progressives. The progressive community is relatively small in this country, and the potential for a nuclear disarmament movement, I think, extends far beyond that, as we saw in the freeze, where the co-chairs of the freeze movement were Republicans in both the House and the Senate. I don't think we're going to see that today, given the state of the Republican Party. But I think that there are broad segments of the population which don't particularly embrace the entire progressive agenda that most of us do, who are potentially involved and potentially strong allies of this movement. I've been meeting, with some business leaders who have access to people in Congress that I don't have access to, who have access to other centers within the country that can influence opinion. And I think we need to create a movement that does not feel to them forbidding. If the nuclear disarmament movement gets branded as a progressive movement, it will not succeed. And it needs to be very welcoming to progressives, but it needs to do that in a way that does not put off people who do not consider themselves progressives. And, I think the way you do that is you emphasize what's at stake here. Gorbachev and Reagan didn't agree about all kinds of stuff, but they did agree that there shouldn't be a nuclear war. And I think that's really the key to it. We need to, as we did in building the ICANN and the campaign for the TPNW, we focused on what is at stake here, what the medical consequences are going to be, the humanitarian impact, and try to reach out to anybody who understood that that is where we are heading with nuclear weapons. And we're heading there very quickly. And I think that's the other piece that we need to be cognizant of. The many ills of society all deserve our attention, but we don't have a lot of time to deal with this particular ill. And, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know when it's going to happen, but we are as much on a collision course as we were in the 1980s. And we know, looking back at the 1980s, that we really just didn't have a nuclear war because we were unbelievably lucky. And we're not talking about something that we can build a movement over the next 20 years about. We've got to see some very decisive change quickly. The idea that Joe put forward about the need for a victory, I think, is really important. But I think we need to be careful how we define that victory. Excuse me. And I think that victory is by achieving significant measurable steps towards the goal of elimination of nuclear weapons, rather than achieving one of the several good intermediate steps that are, for that matter, part of the Back from the Brink platform. What we have found, I think, by focusing on presidential authority, no first use, is that they don't get a lot of traction. They are seen by people as being inadequate responses to the imminent threat of nuclear war. Certainly, we want to talk about presidential authority this year in the context of a possible Trump presidency, but we're not going to win that. We're not going to change that policy. I don't think we're going to win any of these interim steps until we fundamentally change the conversation in this country and get people to understand that deterrence is a myth, that nuclear weapons need to go. And once we win that conversation, I think the intermediate steps will make perfect sense and they'll follow fairly quickly as the negotiations to actually eliminate the weapons proceed. But what we really need to do is to figure out how to win that conversation, to get the American people to understand that nuclear weapons, the current status, current policy of the United States, does not make us safe, that it is exposing us to an imminent existential threat. And then it's a question of defining, what are benchmarks. So, for example, our work in Congress, we don't expect, Back from the Brink doesn't expect Congress to pass a resolution and to change U.S. policy. That isn't going to happen. What we're hoping to do, though, is to get enough people in Congress to stand up for this, that becomes a fact, that we've got champions now advocating for this. And we've advanced, to a significant milestone in the process of transforming the conversation around nuclear weapons so that people are focusing on the question, do we need to get rid of them or not? Sorry, I didn't mean to speak so long. Forgive me.
Yeah, Joe?
You're muted.
Muted.
Thanks. To respond to Diane's point, I also believe that it is absolutely not a left-right issue, and it is a mistake to go down that path. The issue is risk, and the issue is risk management. And, there's a point of view that says doing something about this is not a matter of popularity or public opinion. It's a question of responsibility in governance. So if I'm a member of this government, I don't need anybody to tell me they support this. I just need to ask myself the question, am I doing what I should be doing to guard against this risk? And, nobody in the general public wants to think about risk, certainly not this risk. So who is going to think about this? And look, it's perfectly okay for all of us to go through our lives as if we're never going to die. But it's not okay for somebody in our government to go through life acting as if nuclear weapons aren't going to get used, because they are.
Kevin?
Well, I like the focus on that it should not be a left-right issue. On the other hand, look at any successful social change movement in this country. Who made it happen? It wasn't the right, or if it was the right, it made things worse for most of us, right? Made things better for the few, for the rich, for the corporations. But I do think we shouldn't give up on that. It should be a matter of survival. And even if you're a rich, despicable, exploitive capitalist, you want to keep making money. You don't want to risk that. So you should be for getting rid of nukes. It should be an issue of survival. But something that Ira said is something that I and other people have kicked around for a while, and actually mentioned this a year or two ago in a webinar that I was on with Gensuiken in Japan, and they had Mayor Akiba, the former mayor of Hiroshima, and we said we were going to do a webinar on dismantling deterrence theory, and we never got around to it. Maybe he has done it and I haven't seen it. I don't know. But I think two concepts that are unfortunately just so inbred at this point, not only deterrence theater, but escalation dominance. I think people have this just myth that they think the United States is just so powerful that we're always going to maintain escalation dominance over any other foe. And if there's a way to try to unpack those and undercut those in a non-super wonky way, deterrence theory really means threatening to annihilate another country. That's what deterrence theory really means, to incinerate, men, women, and children in another country. So I would definitely be in favor of a group of folks thinking about how could you do some kind of popular education campaign, which might include celebrities, might include some policy wonk types, but also people that can popularize it on the myth of deterrence and escalation dominance. Because if you can sort of pull that stool, that leg of the nuclear stool out, that leg of the triad, if you will, that intellectual leg of the triad, we might make a lot more progress than we do. Because it's interesting to me how they just say the word deterrence like it's a magical word. Even the Sentinel, the original name was ground-based strategic deterrent. They thought they had to put the word deterrence in the name of the missile, which in a way was sort of defensive to me. So I don't know. I do think that it's not a popular campaign, but if you can link the issue of survival, that it's not left-right, with trying to dismantle the myths of deterrence and escalation dominance, that could be a real contribution, I think.
Thanks. Going to call on myself for a minute. I had a couple things that I wanted to say. One of them was that I was talking about winning this conversation, and the one that you've been talking about, Kevin. I'm actually more focused on how do we have this conversation than how do we win it, because I think the arguments are pretty powerful. We do have the deterrence problem, but I think a lot of us know how to answer that. But we got to get people in the room, and we're willing to listen one way or another. And one of the ways that I think that we have not used very effectively is social media. So I would like to throw social media into the mix here as being something that we really need to use more effectively How many people on this call have a TikTok account? Instagram? Yeah. I mean, see, we don't feel comfortable. People of our age don't feel comfortable with those tools, but that's where the young people are listening. And we need to go where they're listening. And, you know, to some extent it's webinars and we can do that, but the educational effort that we're talking about, the educational effort that is so important and that is so missing at this point. Because remember, the 1980s, 35, 40 years ago, a lot of the people that we're trying to reach weren't born. They haven't had that education. And a lot of the people who are our age and have had that education have forgotten it. So the education is really, really important, but it's not going to be done the way we did it last time. We need to, you know, we need to come up with new ways, and the new ways I think are ones that we aren't very comfortable with. So we need to get comfortable with it, or else find young folks that are comfortable with it. So go ahead, Joseph.
So first of all, just to, I agree with that, but you know, there's 24 hours in a day. And so I think we need to, you know, those who are comfortable can build on the work that other people are doing, and you know, we find a way of moving forward together. But I certainly understand the importance of that. Two things I want to say. One is I really like Kevin's idea of focusing around deterrence and its dangers and failures, and I'd be glad to work with others on that. But that's certainly something that my organization could take on, I think, pretty successfully. What initially led me to raise my hand was more a question than anything else. To my amazement, sometime before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I got invited to participate in what's called the Track 2 discussion, where I'm the one who's quite different from everybody else. Senior figures from the Russian, US, and European security establishment, people who have been or still are advisors to government, generals, and so on. It takes place about every 3 weeks. And what you hear in those discussions right now is a profound anxiety about the lack of any strategic stability between the United States and NATO on one hand and Russia on the other, and a searching on their part for ways in the middle of this war to create some degree of strategic stability. And I guess my question is not an advocacy, but a question. Is there a way that we can be raising this, at least in some meaningful circles, to help provide the foundation for the kind of trust that will be needed if we're going to make international progress in terms of disarmament, let alone abolition?
Okay, Diane. And I'd like to welcome into the group Rivera's son, who I think is a terrific strategist, and like to hear what you have to say about this as soon as Diane has her say.
So I was just going to add, you know, I agree with that. We need to get rid of this deterrence isn't going to work kind of attitude. And what you need to address there is the alternative. I'm looking at this book. It's World Beyond War, and it's a global security system, an alternative to war. You know, we need to do some peace building, and we need to, you know, what are the options to nuclear weapons? You know, there's this thought that we would be like Ukraine if we didn't have nuclear weapons because Russia would just come in. And I don't think that's, you know, deterrence, whether it's nuclear or conventional, we've got to get past the idea that you've got to have bigger weapons than the other guy if you're going to survive. You know, how do we solve conflicts? How do we, you know, what are the options? And there's like nothing, you know, there's no awareness or understanding of options out there that I see. Like, where are the conflict resolution skills that any kindergarten teacher has? I mean, it's like, you know, we need to work on that. Anyway.
Rivera, do you have something you'd like to stick in here? You're muted. Oh, there we go.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was not here an hour ago. I just completely mixed up the times and I regret that. I would love to listen a little bit more before chiming in, then I can get a sense of what else is being said. Is that okay, Peter?
Sure. Okay, well, we've had quite a few interesting ideas suggested here. Working with the Students for Nuclear Disarmament is, I think, a very promising way to go. Linking to broader militarism as a way to help build the movement is something we should certainly talk about. Getting celebrities recruited into the work that we're doing, I think, is centrally important. Arousing people's understanding that there is a serious nuclear threat. That's another thing we talked about. And I was saying Back from the Brink is the plan that we already have, so we don't need to develop a new plan. But Joe, who works on Back from the Brink, was saying we need a theory of change. We mentioned business leaders as being important, a group that we haven't activated this time, and there was a group called Business Executives for Nuclear Safety or Sanity or something like that back in the 80s that had an important effect. And warning us against being branded as a progressive movement, I think, was a good suggestion. The question of deterrence, pointing out that it's a myth, is a good tactic. And addressing the lack of strategic stability. These are things that I noted down. I noticed that our note taker is no longer in the groups. I've been trying to kind of keep at least track of a few of the ideas. So I'd like us to kind of think a little bit more about what we can do with these ideas. They're all great ideas, but how do we actually go after some of these ideas? Ira, you've got something you wanted to add here.
Yeah, just a real simple thing. Annie Jacobson's book, Nuclear War, I think is just an incredibly powerful tool that we should need to talk a little bit about how to take best advantage of. It's getting, I mean, I think it provides one half of the message. The nuclear war is coming and it's going to be horrible very powerfully. It doesn't talk about what to do. And Annie's been very explicit in interviews that that's not her field. She's not an activist. She doesn't know how to build a movement, but she's certainly willing to promote the idea that we need a movement and to encourage people to join the movements the organizations that exist. And I think the book, we have talked a lot in the past about the need, and suggested by the comments about celebrities, to get popular culture more engaged on this issue. This book is sort of doing that in a significant way. Back from the Brink is going to be doing a webinar with Annie on Wednesday, May 29th. The invitation and the save the date will go out on Tuesday or Wednesday this week, but I can just alert you all to it now, and would love to have any organizations that want to co-sponsor it and help to promote it. I think that the attention she's getting in the press is really quite significant, and again, part of this wave that we were talking about before. But something that we need to think about how to use.
What's the name again?
The book is called Nuclear War: A Scenario. The author is Annie Jacobson. What she does is she just takes a potential scenario where North Korea attacks the United States and it escalates into an all-out nuclear war, and goes through it like minute by minute, the first 72 minutes. What happens when the first missile gets launched from North Korea? And it's kind of a potboiler. It's very hard to put down. It got optioned by Hollywood 2 weeks after it came out. Now, people have been trying for years to get Hollywood to make a movie. Nick Myers, the guy who directed The Day After, it's literally been trying for 10 years to get a Hollywood studio to finance him to make a sort of follow-up movie to that tells the story that needs to be told today, and it's not been successful. 2 weeks after this book came out, a major studio optioned it for the director. I'm sorry, I don't follow movies that well. I think his name is Villeneuve. He's the guy who directed the Dune movies and Blade Runner and Arrival, major movies that get a big, huge audience. So there's a very good possibility that after he finishes the Dune movie he's working on, the third installment, he will make a movie out of this. It's a real potential way of raising this conversation, and she talks in the book very directly to the fallacy, the mythology around deterrence, and how this is just an emperor with no clothes idea. So a very valuable resource for us to be aware of. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Oh God, what happened to? Oh, okay.
There she is.
There she is again. Go ahead, Rivera.
I just wound up in a breakout room, but I'm back. Yeah, I just wanted to add a few things to this really rich discussion, and thanks for the recap, Peter. That was really helpful. Yeah, there could be an interesting campaign with Hollywood folks about, being more conscious about how they're using nukes. Like they use nukes in the 3-Body Problem on Netflix, and it's absolutely obscene. Not on Earth as a sci-fi thing. But I think some other strategies that could be thought about and pursued include kind of building on some of the great work that ICANN has done and getting the signers of the treaty to make sure that some of them kick the US's nukes out of their territories, right? Officially, to follow through with what they've said they want to do. But then also that they are leveraging that position on nukes to push back at other military installation, the military contractors that are involved in nuclear production in the US, like Raytheon or Boeing, and leveraging like we do with any other divestment campaign, saying you're involved in this immoral activity that we oppose. How can we award you a contract to build our fighter jets, for example? I also think that I don't have a great analysis on this, but there's probably a handful of key military people, high-ranking military people that could be important to get them to shift on the being more outspoken about the instability of these weapons and the fact that they do not provide defense and they suck resources from things that they think would provide a different form of defense. I don't know who they are. Somebody else probably has that knowledge. And then I wonder, and again, some of our great groups who lobby every day and know more about the diplomatic scene, if there's like a diplomatic value to disarmament deals, right? So you do this and we deconstruct 1,000 nuclear weapons, right? Because we have way more than we need. It's almost like having a surplus in the bank. And maybe there's a way to encourage the State Department or whatever to use them, the disarmament, for achieving other goals that they seek. And then the last thing I wonder is there something interesting that could be done about AI against nukes, or like AI-free nukes? I mean, it's such a buzz right now. And I think it does bring up the haunting specter of like, if this goes on autopilot, we have no idea how that would turn out. So thank you. Those are just some thoughts that I have.
Thanks, Rivera. Kevin?
Well, that last point connects to something I was thinking about, which is what's great about these kinds of conversations, that we can connect some things that we wouldn't have thought to. So when I was talking earlier about the importance of intersectionality and the fact that looking at broader structures of militarism and economic exploitation and climate change, et cetera, one of the things that I don't think we've emphasized enough is what Elaine Scarry did in her book that came out, 6-7 years ago, Thermonuclear Monarchy. It was such the name of the book pretty much tells you the story, that any nominal democracy that we have, or that France has, or England, or other countries that don't have democracy at all, is made a mockery of the fact that one person can start a nuclear war and that can end life on Earth. So you can connect that to sole authority and no first use. And oh my God, if Trump is president, he's such a nutbag, he might start a nuclear war, which is fine. But the broader point about the lack of democratic decision making around nuclear weapons and how it just really thwarts any notion of democracy, I thought she did a great job in laying that out. And I don't know that we've emphasized that enough, but that could be part of the package if you're looking at, deconstructing deterrence and escalation dominance. This might be another point to emphasize the lack of democracy inherent in nuclear weapons command and control.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that just a little bit. If you'll pardon me, Diane, I'll call on you in a second. Let's see, that was, yeah, it's gone out of my mind. Go ahead, Diane, I'm sorry.
Well, I just liked a lot of the things that Rivera just said, and we certainly need to address the economic issues of the nuclear weapons are taking things away from, or any weapon system is taking, away from human needs, right? And like we've got the Warheads to Windmills book out, that's talking about we could be putting this, not only the brain power, but the resources into solving our problems as opposed to killing each other. We have like major problems we could be addressing if we weren't busy trying to make bigger weapons. And so it seems like we've got like a three-legged stool there. We want to, prohibit nuclear weapons, or all weapons maybe, but nuclear weapons to start with. We want a global security. We need to do that peace building part, and we need to address the economic realities of, when we're putting all these resources into weapons, we are not building the society that we need to live on Earth effectively. And there was one other thing, I just forgot what it was. But anyway, those, I'm glad to kind of have the economic issue come up there. Oh, the other thing is the whole thing with the signers to the TPNW are all these countries around the world. They're also the countries that are calling on, people to get out of Gaza and to support the international court decisions. And so I think we need to definitely support these countries around the world to say no to our bases and to sort of economically force the big powers to behave. I don't know.
I wanted to, I remember now what I was going to say around what Kevin mentioned, and that was that all of us who live in this country like to think of ourselves, or I don't, but a lot of people do like to think of themselves as part of a country that has nuclear weapons, and they think of themselves as nuclear haves. But actually they're nuclear have-nots because they have no control of it. They have no control over whether their taxes get spent for it. And so they're really not, they're not our weapons. And I think that's an important point for people to understand. They're not our weapons. They're the weapons of a very, very, very small group of people who have their fingers in the pie. And the rest of us are absolute victims of it, both financially and in terms of security.
Peter, I wanted to just add that you talked about that nuclear weapons have also done all this damage even before they were used.
Yeah.
It's another maybe unusual thought that I have from talking with young people and being, only 41, which is somewhere in the middle, is this feeling of like nuclear weapons are like strangely irrelevant. Like they're so dangerous, they loom over everything, but at the same time, like you can't use them and everyone knows you can't. And somehow we've managed to survive 80 years of not blowing ourselves up with them, which is pretty impressive, or 70 years, whatever we're up to. And I'm wondering if there is like any value in reframing them as obsolete, outmoded, old-fashioned, like just it's time to retire nuclear weapons because they have no place in modern warfare and they are inherently dangerous to everyone.
Okay. Kevin?
Not to be argumentative, but Daniel Ellsberg and one Joseph Gerson argue that nuclear weapons have been used by every US president as a threat, not actually dropped on another country. One thing I don't think that we do enough, I mean, we're so serious about all this stuff and we need to be taken serious. But if you look at Gene Sharp's list of nonviolent tactics or whatever, one of them is ridicule. And nuclear weapons deserve some ridicule. So I think, and this hasn't really come up yet, but the process that's being led by Plowshares Fund, but it's not just their campaign, but getting groups to work together to stop the new arms races with Russia and China. And it can encompass, it's fairly broad, it can encompass a lot of the campaigns that already exist. One of the things that may come together is a campaign against Sentinel, the new ICBM. And I think that's ripe for ridicule. And I think we could call it the Spendinal or something like that. And look at how much money is being spent and wasted by Northrop Grumman and all the rest of these contractors. And that might connect more with young people. Because young people are really good at smelling out contradictions and hypocrisy. And so that we say that these things are, you know, to defend us. No, they're defending the stock prices of Northrop Grumman and Bechtel and all those thieves. So as that comes forward, if there is a campaign on Sentinel, and there could be some strategic questions about that. I think some groups will want to get rid of the whole ICBM leg of the triad. And, you know, while we talk about TPNW and moving towards abolition, and others might say, well, we need to get a sort of realistic win out of Congress. So we want to scrap the Sentinel, but we'll spend, you know, hundreds of millions to preserve and upgrade the existing Minutemen III. And that'll have to be an argument that people have if there's a campaign around Sentinel. But it seems like that weapon system is really ripe for ridicule and something we ought to think about. How do we do that?
Thanks, Kevin.
And I appreciate, Peter, that we're not talking so much about particular campaigns like that. It's just something that popped in my head.
Diane?
I just wanted to say, when you're talking about that nuclear weapons are worthless, I remember a conference we did when I worked with PSR in the 80s with Admiral Geiler, who's one of the 4-star admirals who came out against weapons. And he was the guy that was in charge of the Pacific Fleet during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he says, yeah, a nuclear weapon is like an albatross around your neck. It's like you can't use it, but you have to protect it. So that's, you know, they are obsolete in that way. But my concern now too is Russians are talking about, and I'm not really up on the details, but talking about nuclear weapons in space, you know, to knock out communication systems or whatever. And I guess my concern is that if they're going to start, you know, if we have a new nuclear weapons space race, and that we've got to be ahead of the other guy, it goes back to that, again, deterrence thing that, you know, we've got to stay ahead of them rather than find an alternative way to get along. And we need to avoid that new arms race is what I'm.
Yeah, Joseph.
So first of all, just to appreciate the role of ridicule, and I do like the suggestions, you know, coming out of Rivera and Kevin in that regard, and looking at who makes the money on it. I guess a point I need to make is that nuclear weapons actually can serve a particular, if disgusting, purpose. And we see this in the early Russian nuclear threats related to Ukraine, because those threats have in a sense terrorized NATO and certainly Biden into limiting the kind of support that they've given to Ukraine. I mean, Noam Chomsky, building off of what Dan Ellsberg was teaching, Noam wrote that, again, he was quoting from Secretary of Defense Brown, that the weapons have served a purpose in terms of ensuring that other nations don't come to the aid of countries that we're determined to attack. And this has been the case certainly for the United States. I indicate 30 occasions in my book, but other countries too, Russia, Israel. Every nuclear power has made this threat at least once. So I appreciate that our movements have to build on a kind of emotional drive, right? I mean, it's just dry analysis doesn't take you where you want to go. But at the same time, if we want to be engaging some of the figures who, as Joe was saying, have the power, the hands on the levers to make the change, what we do and say has to be rooted in empirical reality.
Okay, and I wanted to follow up on the ridicule thing too, by pointing out that for 50 years now, I've been part of a thing called Dr. Atomic's Medicine Show, and we do political satire, and we're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. Our motto, I think, is very worth paying attention to, which is a quote from the humorist Lord Buckley, who said, "It is the duty of the humor of any given time to cause the people to laugh at the danger that confronts them in such a way that they do not die before they get killed." And so that's what we try and do, and it's just another way of alerting people to the issue that is confronting us, that takes them out of the realm of what Joseph was saying about dry, factual material, and starts putting them into the realm of some kind of emotional response. So I wish there were a whole lot more political satirists that were focusing on this issue. So we are getting toward the tail, to the last quarter hour or so of our breakout session, and I would like us to start getting into the realm of what we can summarize. We'll have a very brief time, perhaps a minute in the plenary, to point out what the best ideas were that came out of here. And I would like somebody to volunteer to do that, and for us to decide what we want them to say.
Peter, you did a really good job of summarizing our conversation when a few minutes ago, when Rivera joined the conversation. And could you do that?
Well, I could, but there's I've added quite a few more. There's now about 15 or 20 ideas down here, and we don't have room for 20 or 15 or 20 ideas. I'd like us to pick out the best ones.
Well, we could do that, but you could do the reporting.
Oh, yeah, okay. So let's, do you want me to go through them again? Or
Yeah.
what I've gotten written down here? The best laid plans of mice and men. We were supposed to have a note taker in here, and it wasn't supposed to be me, but anyway, Students for Nuclear Disarmament was one. Link our issue to the broader issue of militarism, recruiting celebrities, extending the awareness of, or the consciousness of, the nuclear threat, realizing that the back from the brink approach is an extensive plan, needing a theory of change, remembering that business leaders are an important constituency that we haven't tapped. Remembering that we can't be branded as progressives if we want to be successful. Focusing on deterrence as a myth. Focusing on the lack of strategic stability that currently exists. Taking advantage of a movie if it emerges in the next year or so. What was this? Oh yeah, getting the members of the signers of the TPNWs to actually do what they said that they were going to do. Can focus on divestment. We can focus on military leaders. We can talk about the connection between AI and democracy and nuclear weapons as a whole, especially using them in an AI context, and how counter-democratic that is. Diane mentioned a three-legged stool of the movement wanting to prohibit nuclear weapons, focus on common security and economic resources. The superior uses for economic resources. I mentioned the nuclear have-nots focus. Nuclear weapons are old-fashioned and obsolete, and consequently useless. And then the whole idea of ridicule, satire, especially focusing on the Sentinel missile program. So those were all the ones that I wrote down. Which ones do you want us to bring to the conference?
You're muted.
Sorry, you went through that whole list in just under 2 minutes. I timed it. So I don't know how many minutes we get to make our presentation, but you may be able to present that whole list.
No, that's people are going to tune that out. I mean, this whole list will appear in the email that goes out, but that's too much for people to take in. So I'd like some nominations for. Yeah, go ahead, Joseph.
So I'm thinking that, if we had a different kind of technology or access to it, if we were all in the same room, we could go up, put stickers by the different items.
Right.
Or there are ways you can do it technologically, but I don't have that skill to do it. So what I'm finding myself thinking, Peter, because these will all be made available to people. And at the end of 2 hours, people will be hearing from 8, 9 groups, which would be a lot to take in anyhow. So part of me is thinking, why don't you take a look over that, look at what you think are maybe the most energizing and encouraging ones, maybe 7, even 10, but noting that the full list will be available. So that moves us forward without some of the frustrations of process with this technology. But others may have better ideas. I see other hands up.
Okay, Rivera.
I have many of those ideas I like, but one thing I'd like to mention, and others can say other ideas, is, we know extending the awareness of the nuclear threat is actually important. But that's a goal. And then tactics to achieve that goal might include ridicule and satire, taking advantage of movies and pop culture, and even talking about AI and nukes together. So I would recommend using that as one point with the goal and the tactics.
Okay. Kevin.
That's a good package. I like that. Mine was more of a process question, so maybe Joe should go before me.
Well, and mine is a process question too, which is, and I think Rivera stated it, I think would be really helpful if we could say what our best strategy observation is, and then share some tactical possibilities. So different levels of things need to be considered in different buckets. Thanks.
Well, so my question was kind of what are we envisioning as next steps? Because we're going to have a lot of rich information from today, I'm sure, and some process of sifting or distilling or prioritizing, I imagine, might happen over time. And then we might reconvene for another Zoom in what, a month or two? Or I just don't know what sort of envision going forward. And in a way that sort of informs what I think we should do now. And I don't know that we should try to winnow necessarily. You're right, Peter, though. When people do report backs at the conferences, I'm falling asleep. So that's a tough one. But if it's all captured and written down, then we don't lose anything.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier in the conference that when you look at your email, you'll find that you've been invited to a listserv that is intended to follow up all this material that's coming out today. All the ideas that come out are going to be not only listed, but also categorized. So, there'll be little blocks of them, however Ward decides they ought to go, because he's going to do that. Yes, we could do another conference like this in some number of months, if people feel like that's a good idea. But the main thing that we wanted people to do is to look at this in their small groups, in whatever group they work with in their community, and say, this is a way that we hadn't thought of to bring more people into our group. And that's what I'm really looking for our group, is the idea that, what's the next big thing for us to do, and that we think is really going to be likely to add more folks to our group, and especially more young folks to our group. So that's kind of that's getting into what Joe was asking for in terms of theory of change. Yeah, Joe, you're next.
Sorry, I didn't mean to leave my hand up. I didn't have anything.
Okay, Ira then.
Just two very specific things in terms of engaging young people. If you're going to be mentioning specifics, I would mention Students for Nuclear Disarmament. And in terms of where you talked about, working with a movie that comes out, I think would be valuable, since people in this group weren't aware of it, to specifically reference Andy Jacobson's book, which is something people should be aware of and can use very concretely.
Okay, well, I'll be definitely mentioning the movie. That's an important one. Got a few more folks coming into our group now. So anything else people would like us to
what movie were you saying? I came in late. You mentioned a movie. Which one?
We'll mention it back when we get into the yeah.
Peter,
So,
I think the group has become the group as a whole. People are coming back in from other groups now.
Their thing. So let me broadcast a 2-minute warning to their other groups. We would like to get back together again in about 2 minutes. So please end your small group discussions and prepare to come back into the main group. Okay. So this has been a very rich discussion, friends, and I really appreciate all your thoughts about it. And I also appreciate all the work that is represented in this room, and especially this room as it gets bigger. I think we've been all thinking about these things for a long time, and people have put a lot of energy into it, and I really want to give a shout out to everybody who has been doing that. So, any final comments before this group becomes the entire group?
Oh, well done, Peter.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, this is so important. What a great, rich plethora of knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, there's names in this group that I remember from the 80s, and people that I've been working with, and people that I've just been reading your work for a long time. So it's exciting. So folks are coming back in. And
this meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. Whoever started the recording, that was well thought.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're back together. I think it's you, Ward.
Okay. So we're going to spend just a brief time. We promised you we weren't going to do hours of speechifying. We want each of the breakout groups to present one idea in 2 sentences that was really exciting. And so, you know, whatever the one idea was that you guys came up with, you need a spokesperson for the group, and then we need to say it really fast. I'm going to be the spokesperson for group 6, and here are we're going to do 4 ideas. 1, we should have a big database of everyone so that we can distribute ideas throughout the entire movement. 2, we should have an overall plan. That's really strategy, not tactics. We love the idea of stickers, little stickers that are everywhere at eye level. They really work. And next year's the 80th anniversary, and we should really lean into that. Okay, who's next?
I'll go next. I'm the representative for our group, and I also will bring a couple of them in. We noted that there's a book that's come out just recently, Nuclear War, a Scenario, that has been optioned by Hollywood, and it's going to turn into a movie. And this time, when this movie comes out, we ought to be ready to really take advantage of it in a way that we didn't with Oppenheimer. So that was one. Also, the importance of ridicule was mentioned, political satire, making fun, especially of the idea of the Sentinel missile. And also the third idea that we wanted to bring up was there's a group called Students for Nuclear Disarmament that has been forming and is growing quite rapidly. Back from the Brink has been instrumental in helping that get off the ground. And we should think about can we somehow spark the formation of a Students for Nuclear Disarmament group in our local areas. So those are our top ideas.
Okay.
We had lots of other ones though.
Somebody else?
We're number 2, and Alan is going to speak on behalf of our group.
Thank you very much. So a key sentiment in our group was we're not going to get to a nuclear weapons-free world only addressing US nuclear policies. We need to be addressing the policies of all the nuclear weapon states. Threats are coming from other ones, not just the US. One good way of doing that was proposed was to have a short statement that we do as a global statement on supporting the nuclear taboo, particularly because that was recognized in the G20 summit in Bali non-use of nuclear weapons, because the leaders agreed that the threat or use of nuclear weapons was inadmissible. So let's call them on that and do a joint statement around the world, but also to operationalize that to say, and no new nuclear weapons, stop the funding for new nuclear weapons. We could do a joint statement. Now, how could we present this globally? The best day for doing this would be September 26th, which is the UN International Day for the Elimination of Nuclear Weapons. There's a high-level meeting at the UN. So presidents, prime ministers, foreign ministers, defense ministers are there speaking. We could get a slot, one of the 2 civil society slots. And in order to help facilitate that, we could ask or request the UN High Rep of Disarmament to help facilitate an online meeting of organizations from around the world to build cooperation on such a joint global statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Alice, do you want me to go for breakout group 3? Okay, right. So we had, I think our main idea was reviving the idea of a nuclear freeze. We feel that things have deteriorated so much that, and we're not saying abandon the national Back from the Brink campaign, which is a great start, but there's a good reason to think that we've got to freeze things now before we lose this small window of opportunity where things really go to hell if we wait any longer. How we do that, we still don't know, but it was mentioned that education is going to be very important. All the means we can think of on that. And one of our members strongly advocated that getting a discussion about what security really means and how nuclear weapons aren't bringing security is going to be important. Also, we're very encouraged by the young people involved in the Gaza protests. I think that was another theme of our conversations. But keeping those nonviolence is going to be very important. So advocating nonviolence. We also touched on the Veterans for Peace Golden Rule voyage around many cities. That's a great, has been great in publicizing nonviolent direct action. I think those are our main themes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Group 4, I would like, we covered a lot of these topics also. I'd like Arthur to talk about his using movies idea, and then Jim to talk about involving youth. So Arthur, would you go first for group 4?
Yes, films are a great way to both do fundraisers and build a movement. We specifically have a campaign to do that with the film, the television event, which has just been on many PBS stations, and which David Hartsoe can tell you more about. And we have a program where you can both do a screening, get a speaker like the director of the film and others, and charge admission and split the funds with the organization, and also use that as a tool, because young people then can, the director says that young people actually like it more than the people who remember the day after. I mean, the people who remember it love it, but he's had a terrific reaction from young people, and they really want to, it alerts them because it's a hero's journey story of these producers who managed to create this incredible film and reach 100 million Americans and 200 million Russians, despite legal threats, death threats, everything else. And so it's inspiring that we can do it. And then also people need an overall framework of how we can rise above the war system and create a better way to create a law above the nations that divide us. And that can, a similar program we have with the film, The World Is My Country. So I'll put both of those in the chat, and we can talk more with anyone who's interested in using film to build funds, movement, and to empower leaders.
And the other one that we talked about,
Jim Thomas, yes.
Yeah, the other one we talked about for our group was getting into schools and involving young people. Some barriers might exist to getting into public schools, but then there's all the private schools, especially at the high school level and college, and utilizing the new group, Students for Nuclear Disarmament.
Great.
And we also talked about warheads to windmills, tying together the two movements, nuclear war and the environment, and appealing to young people.
So perhaps I could speak for Group 1. We were fortunate to be joined by Kenan from Uganda, and he mentioned the excitement that's being felt all across Africa because of a young person having become the president of Senegal. And they will try to encourage Senegal's ratification of the treaty.
Right.
And we spoke in our group about the importance of signing the treaty, and Kenan said that they will press Uganda to sign the treaty. We also said, follow the young people, that we're living in a time when there is such a spontaneous outpouring for divestment and boycott. And the same companies that are contributing toward the slaughter of people in Gaza are the companies that are contributing toward the potential annihilation of life on Earth because of their support for nuclear weaponry. And so hopefully this spontaneous growth of demand for protection from the greatest threats we really face, the threats of nuclear annihilation and ecological collapse, and that this obviously calls for collaboration between countries and an end to the demonization that feeds the idea that these war makers can keep on selling their products to us. So a big plus for going into achievable goals by going into our local areas, whether it's tabling at a farmer's market or getting faith-based communities to gather together and go through the arduous process of sometimes implementing laws that are already on the books, but being ready for the long haul and recognizing that if we kind of hang our or hitch our wagons to the elusive goal of fundraising, we might sometimes miss our opportunities for activism.
Okay. That's all 6 groups. So let me say a few things, and then turn it over briefly to Cherrill. First of all,
were there more than, I thought we were more than 6.
There were 7 groups?
There was a 7th group, but we were only 2 people, so we folded into the group that Peter led.
Excellent. So I want to
thank you.
I want to say a big thank you to all the facilitators who worked on this and tried to pull out the best from all of you. And you facilitators, you're the bomb, so to speak. And also to all the note takers. The note takers play an essential role. Please send me, email me your notes. I am going to be compiling and collating all the suggestions from all the groups, and that information will then be sent out to all of you who participated. So that's going to be an important part of the ongoing work we do.
Is your email address in the chat?
No, gosh, I'm such a loser. Let's see, ward@realistrevolt.org.
Thank you.
And so I want to say a big thank you to Peter, who thought of this conference and organized it from the beginning and did a ton of the work. And also to the committee that gathered around him and helped a little bit, mostly with the work that he pushed us forward to do. I think our hope is to create a listserv that will include everyone who's been, and that we can essentially become a kind of a think tank without walls and concentrate the best thinking of all of us, the best practices, the successes, the things that don't work, and use that information to coordinate our movement so that it grows exponentially and really takes off. We've set up the listserv. It's called Building for Abolition, and you've all been sent an invitation to it. Please use it, participate in it. give us your best ideas. Send us your funny jokes. Tell us the strangest stories. Susie Snyder was really made a point of saying, you know, it's a dark subject. We've got to really have some fun sometimes. And Cherrill, tell us what we should do next.
Yes, I add my thanks to, we've had at least 41 people participating in this conference. My internet connection is unstable, so I hope I will just close my video. I think we've managed to gather together in one place all the major organizations working against nuclear weapons, and possibly the first time all these people have been together in one room. So let us now use the fact that we've got you all together to continue talking to each other. You have the listserv invitation that you will find in your inbox. And if you really don't want to, then you refuse to be on the listserv. But I hope nobody will do that. We did have 68 people said they would come, 41 or so of you did. So I think we are already a movement. We just need to make the public realize we are a movement and we are working against nuclear weapons. And I'm hoping that one of the things we will do is actually have a website, a new website that is about nuclear abolition movement. So we can populate that with all the kinds of information that comes across my desk every day, and others of you working so hard on your own strategies. If you're a local group, you will need a different type of strategy from the national groups. But everybody should be involved and get their activities better known. And I think it is very possible that we should do that. We are working against very strong powers that be. We're working against the military industrial think tank academic complex, and we need to be as powerful as them. I'm sure we represent a lot more people than that group, the military industrial academic think tank complex. We are actually more people than them. We don't have as much money, so fundraising, getting funds through some of these ideas is a very important activity. I know that Alan just had a fundraising for one of his ideas, and you made several $1,000s through one of those organizations that you can crowdfund through. So nobody mentioned that, but I think we need to be putting out the hat more often. We should ourselves be helping the movement by putting our own money into it. Most of us are wealthy, middle-class people and follow a religious tithing method, for example. I'm not asking you give 10% of your assets, but trying to, you know, have more money put into what we're doing will help us beat the much better funded military equipment makers and what have you. The amount of money they spend on lobbying Congress is truly amazing, and you can find information on that on various websites. The ICANN website, icanw.org, is a fine website. So I'm hoping that all of you will agree to be on this new listserv. You represent a wide range of organizations, and we are all already working in our own way, but we just need to make ourselves look bigger, because we are quite big. But we have to make the public see that we're a strong movement, and we have come up with several ideas today. So Susie has just put in the chat, for example, where you can read about what was spent on the nuclear industry in the last year or so, and how we've got to get people to divest from that. Many pension plans are doing that already, because we have to hit the nuclear weapons and weapons manufacturers where it hurts most, which is in their profits. They're doing this just to make money for their shareholders. But unfortunately, they influence the foreign policy of the US as well. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming today. Please join the listserv. Please continue with your own activities, but let's join ourselves together and make ourselves a bigger and more effective movement. We have 1 minute to go. Thank you very much, everybody.
This is a new
And
beginning.
I will leave it up to Peter.
This is a new beginning, and I feel
Yes, Peter
excited
Ward,
and
final words.
full of hope that we can do stuff. There's an excitement. This is a moment. This is a time when we can take what we know and move forward and make a difference. I think it is possible. I think we can eliminate nuclear weapons. Peter, this is
I'll
your
just
baby.
add-
Final words?
I'll just add one last thing, and that is that you'll be getting a lot of ideas in your email. And I hope you'll take a look at them and ask yourselves, what can we use in our local group that will expand the number of people and the amount of money that we can raise and the media coverage that we get? Be asking yourself that question. You know, there's a lot of ideas here. Some of them are going to work in some places. Some of them are going to work in other places. Some of them aren't going to work at all. And it's up to us in our local areas to figure out which ones are going to be the right ones for our group and then put them into effect. The goal here is to, as Cherrill was saying, make a much larger movement that can't be ignored, just like we had in the 80s, just like the Gaza movement is doing now. So that's our brief. That's what we need to be doing. That's our marching orders, if you will. So let's go forth and do it. And we'll see you on the listserv.
And click the top of your, the 3 bars at the top of the chat window to save the chat, everybody.
Right.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And the recordings will be put on the WILF website. We will be putting the recordings of the main plenary and the breakout rooms that everybody hopefully recorded. The facilitators were asked to record to their own computer. You will be hearing from us how to send those recordings off to WILF to put on our YouTube channel. Okay, so thank you everybody for coming. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, David and everybody.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.